Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. Thank you very much for allowing me to present on Assembly Bill 2943 to clarify that conversion therapy is a fraudulent practice under the Consumer Legal Remedies Act. I appreciate the opportunity to present this bill. As you have seen in the analysis and as well stated and well known, fraudulent practices with respect to something like conversion therapy is something that we would articulate and argue and suggest to you. In fact, the American Psychiatric Association, the American Psychological Association, the American Counseling Association, the National Association of Social Workers, the American Medical Association all also believe that conversion therapy does not work. And there is no evidence to suggest that it does work, and in fact, it does significant harm to one's mental health. This bill would narrowly apply in cases where a consumer transaction has taken place. And with me today are Dr. Doug Haldeman, former president of the California Psychological Association, Sam Britton, a survivor of conversion therapy, Matthew Shurka, survivor of conversion therapy, and Anthony Sampson, also to speak in support. With respect, I ask for your aye vote.
Thank you. First witness, please.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Doug Haldeman. I am the immediate past president of the California Psychological Association and professor and chair of the doctoral program in clinical psychology at John F. Kennedy University in Pleasant Hill. The California Psychological Association, in agreement with every major healthcare organization in the United States, believes that there is no basis for attempting to change sexual orientation for several reasons. First, same-sex attractions and behaviors are a normative aspect of the human experience and not a form of mental illness requiring treatment. Two, there is no evidence supporting efforts to change sexual orientation, as shown by an extensive review of the scientific literature by the American Psychological Association. Three, these methods pose a substantial risk of harm to the individual. And lastly, there are numerous other therapeutically legitimate methods for addressing the concerns of persons who are questioning or confused about their sexual orientation without resorting to conversion therapy. For 35 years, I have conducted research, written organizational policy, and maintained a clinical practice that included hundreds of boys and men who had undergone some form of so-called conversion therapy, including aversive interventions such as genital electric shock and nausea-inducing drugs, a variety of behavioral methods, residential treatments involving forced isolation, and so forth. Consistent with the lack of empirical support for conversion treatments, none of these methods was effective at changing one's sexual orientation and usually exacerbated the person's already substantial guilt and self-loathing. Many of these patients reported that their conversion therapists had lied to them about same-sex attractions, who told them that their, quote, gay mental illness was the result of early life sexual trauma, or blamed them for not trying hard enough when conversion therapy ultimately failed them. Many reported that their conversion therapists admonished them to change their sexual orientation because gay people's lives are invariably miserable, devoid of productivity, meaning, or fulfilling relationships. If these kinds of messages are the free speech that conversion therapists seek, they would do well to read our Code of Ethics, which prohibits the willful dissemination of inaccurate statements in the service of promoting the methods and manipulating clients. After decades of working with survivors of conversion therapy, I'm absolutely convinced that these treatments hold out false hope to those who are dealing with conflict about their sexual orientation derived from a homophobic social world. These methods don't work and pose substantial risk to the individual. Accordingly, CPA believes that it is in the interest of the state, it is actually the responsibility of the state to accurately identify these practices as consumer fraud. Placing such activities under the Consumer Legal Remedies Act serves to put the purveyors of conversion therapies on notice that they can no longer get away with these practices, and sends a message to LGBT and questioning person of all ages that there is nothing wrong with you. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Next witness.
Chair Stone and fellow members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to share my thoughts on this critical legislation. The Trevor Project is pleased to co-sponsor AB 2943, which, as said, codifies and makes explicit in California law that efforts to change a person's sexual orientation is a fraudulent business practice under the Consumer Legal Remedies Act. As the leading national organization providing crisis intervention and suicide prevention services for LGBTQ youth, the Trevor Project urges the support of legislation to protect the LGBT community from conversion therapy. Conversion therapists, falsely claim to be able to change us into straight and cisgender people. Prominent health associations, including the American Medical Association, American Psychological Association, and others, oppose the use of conversion therapy, calling the practice harmful and ineffective. Following California's lead, only 11 states total have passed legislation limiting the practice on youth, though another 39 states still allow this terrible crisis to continue. Our Trevor Project's Lifeline frequently receives calls of LGBTQ youth in crisis stemming from their experiences in conversion therapy and aims to advocate for the eventual end of the state-sanctioned conversion therapy across the country via our 50 Bills, 50 States campaign. I am a survivor of conversion therapy. The dangerous, discredited, fraudulent idea that a therapist could change my sexual orientation or my gender identity. Although some may say that conversion therapy should be allowed as a choice, I simply reply that I never chose the therapy my family subjected me to during my formative years as a child. My experiences in conversion therapy range from talking about my faith's rejection of my bisexuality all the way to physically aversive techniques like the application of heat, ice, and electricity to my body to forcibly train me to have heterosexual attractions. To respond to those painful years, I now serve as the co-chair of the Born Perfect Advisory Committee and the head of advocacy and government affairs for the Trevor Project. Youth call us in crisis and in suicide, needing someone to speak to when they feel alone and scared. Not all of these youth are victims of conversion therapy, but all have been wounded by a culture that allows the false idea of the choice of one's sexual orientation to permit violence, bullying, and family rejection. In our research with the Williams Institute, we now estimate that 700,000 LGBTQ people have experienced conversion therapy. 80,000 youth are still at risk of conversion therapy in the coming years. You have an opportunity to stop that number from continuing to grow. Conversion therapy does not have a scientific standing. They are stealing from hard-working American families who are being swindled while trying to have the best interest of their children at heart. This is consumer fraud, and courts across the country have agreed on this point time and time again. By notifying the snake oil salesmen that peddle conversion therapy to unsuspecting parents that their practice violates California's consumer protection laws, this legislation will codify protections that could save thousands of lives. They can't change what we never chose.
Thank you. Next witness, please.
Hi, my name is Matthew Shirka. I am a conversion therapy survivor, meaning I had gone through the therapy and I'm an out gay man today. I'm also the lead advocate for the Born Perfect campaign and on the advisor. I'm an advisor on the committee for Born Perfect. I was put into conversion therapy at age 16 when I came out to my parents. I was treated in 4 different states. Specifically was treated in California for 2 years. I want to specifically focus on the fraudulent part, but in total I was conversion therapy from ages 16 to 21 for 5 years, treated by 4 different licensed professionals. My parents spent $35,000 on my conversion therapy. What I was told when I first began conversion therapy was that because I was 16 years old and I hadn't engaged in same-sex intercourse, that I probably would see my opposite sex attraction come back within 6 weeks. When that didn't work, like the gentleman here said, the blame was on me because I, 1, did not try hard enough, or I didn't understand where the trauma was, what caused my homosexuality. So I mentally began a journey on trying to understand where my homosexuality came from. Usually I have to blame a parent or an incident that happened in childhood. Luckily for me, I come from a loving family. I grew up in a conservative home where my parents, I would say, did a great job. And there was actually nothing specific I could actually discover. Because I knew that my sexuality wasn't ever changing, my depression grew. The fears of what it is to come out as a gay man based on what my father feared and what my conversion therapist feared, my depression increased, and I contemplated a possible suicide for 2 years. A part of that therapy was also to separate from all females. I had to go through a defeminized process, so I could understand my roles with males and females. And essentially, I did not speak to my mother and two sisters for 3 years. With all that said and done, and that is the experience of it, what we're seeing today is how conversion therapy is run as a business. My parents spent $35,000, and what was the words that are being used is reparative therapy and conversion therapy, which are interchangeable. And we really discussed this topic as anyone who's attempting to change someone's sexual orientation. Reparative therapy is a term that's been used a lot in the last few decades by a man by the name Joseph Nicolosi Sr., who passed away early last year, and his son Joseph Nicolosi Jr. Is continuing the business and has 2 new offices, one in Manhattan and one in West Hollywood, California. He has recently trademarked reparative therapy, and that's with the USTPO. That's a great concern because it's no longer just described as a therapy, but it's described as a product that it is for sale. Of course, my parents were paid a licensed professional to treat me, but obviously they almost lost me if I committed suicide. I lost my mother for 3 years, was estranged from my entire family for a total of 5, and luckily I was able to rebuild that. But just so we understand that every single medical organization has denounced conversion or reparative therapy. Reparative therapy...
Sir, I need you to wrap up, please.
Sure. In and of itself is saying that it's going against what the medical associations are saying, that because the word repair is in it. It's fraudulent from before you even begin because it's saying that there's something that needs to be fixed, which is anything of the LGBTQ community. I appreciate your time, your consideration on the bill, and I'm in support of. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in support? If you could just give your name and affiliation, please.
Joe Michael for Equality California. On behalf of our 800,000 members and our program, California Faith for Equality, we are a co-sponsor of this bill and we ask for your support. Thank you.
Richard Poppin on behalf of BAMEC, the Bay Area Municipal Elections Committee, in strong support of this bill.
Rebecca Gonzalez, National Association of Social Workers, California Chapter, in strong support.
Alice Kessler, I've been asked by Lambda Legal to express their support for the bill. Thank you.
Emily Ward in strong support.
Bayan Boulad in strong support.
Savina Tacker with the Consumer Attorneys of California in strong support.
Judy Appel, Berkeley School Board, out lesbian and in strong support.
William Mutzenberg on behalf of Policy Link in strong support.
Estrella Lucero on behalf of the Alice B. Toklas Democratic Club, strong support.
Jeremy Payne on behalf of the Stonewall Democratic Club Los Angeles, strong support.
Reverend Dr. Pamela Anderson on behalf of the Sacramento Presbytery as moderator, I am in strong support.
Helene Meshar on behalf of the City of West Hollywood in strong support.
Lydia Bourne representing American Academy of Pediatrics, 5,000 subspecialists as well as board-certified pediatricians in California. We are in support.
Kathy Mossberg representing the San Francisco AIDS Foundation in support.
Jay Calcania with the California Council of Community Behavioral Health Agencies in strong support.
Mandy Lee in my personal capacity as board president of Equality California in strong support.
Carlos Marquez on behalf of the Sacramento LGBT Community Center and the California Charter Schools Association in strong support.
Logan Wolverton in strong support.
Sacramento Stonewall Democratic Club, strong support.
Jim Lindberg on behalf of the Friends Committee on Legislation of California. We're a Quaker-based lobby public interest group in support. Thank you.
Californians for Disability Rights in strong support.
Thank you. Anyone else in support? Seeing none, is there opposition? Would you clear the table for the opposition, please? Thank you. Morning.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, good morning. My name is Kevin Snyder with Pacific Justice Institute Center for Public Policy, where I serve as Chief Counsel. I address briefly the legal discussion in the bill's analysis. This bill differs significantly from the law banning sexual orientation change efforts, or SOCH, for those under 18. Two cases challenged that law under free speech and free exercise of religion. In Pickup versus Brown and Welch versus Brown, the court held that a prohibition on SOCH for persons under 18 survived these challenges because the law was narrowly focused on a regulation of professional conduct. But the Ninth Circuit found that even licensed professionals could communicate with the public about SOCH. In contrast, this bill prohibits SOCH advertisements by all persons. Further, the court found that licensed professionals could continue to recommend SOCH to patients and could administer SOCH to adults and refer minors to unlicensed counselors or religious leaders. Yet under this bill, all of those First Amendment rights are swept away. AB 2943 is not a regulation of professional conduct. It appears under the consumer fraud statutes rather than the Business and Professions Code. Unlike the previous law, this bill stretches far beyond licensed mental health professionals. It reaches religious ministries engaged in SOCH if there is an exchange of money, for example, paying for a religious retreat, a workbook, or a seminar. I direct your attention to what this looks like in another state. 2 months ago, a church put on a seminar that dealt with this very issue. This happened in Michigan. 5 state lawmakers urged the Attorney General to investigate and file an injunction against the church for violating the Michigan Consumer Protections Act. Mr. Chairman, I urge that the members of this body cast a no vote, and I thank you for your deliberation and for your service to the community.
Thank you. Next witness, please.
Hi, thank you, Assembly members, for your time. My name is Ken Williams, and I'm here today because I don't want LGBTQ people to have any rights taken away from them. I believe they deserve every option to pursue happiness the way they determine it. And this bill, which ought to protect them, I believe would actually rip away some inalienable rights to pursue happiness. I was confused about my gender, like the gentleman mentioned before, that they had some confusion and were on a journey to find themselves sexually. I can relate to them, and I can feel that pain. I didn't fit in with the boys or the girls ever in my childhood. And when my sexual desires emerged, they were only for men, and that was really devastating for me. It was very confusing. And at 17, I crashed emotionally, and I was contemplating suicide on a daily basis for a long time. I told my parents finally. I broke down. We cried together. They said they'd love me no matter what, and they asked me how they could help. We found a therapist who would help me pursue my option, which I wanted change. I wanted to live as a man heterosexually. And I devoured the few books and resources that were available. I devoured them, and I joined a group. And some of us experienced the changes that we were looking for in that group. Not everyone did. Despite years of homosexual identity and behavior, my sexual desires did change. I'm no longer sexually attracted to men. And I met a girl and fell in love with her, was sexually aroused by her, and I married her in 2006. She's the one person who thrills me sexually. I'm faithful to her. And she went into heart failure after delivering my twins. And I didn't know if I would ever see her alive again. I ran 4 red lights trying to get to her, hoping I would see her alive again. She's the woman I love. And I held her hand as she miscarried our first child. She is my most precious gift. And 2943 would have stolen this rich life from me. And it would leave the many others like me who are hurting, finding no books, no resources, no therapy. Some do want to live out their same-sex desires, and that is their right. But not everyone who finds himself with same-sex desires is wanting to pursue that, is at peace with that. And so I'm trying to figure out why anyone would want to take away the rights of my people group, which is people finding themselves with desires that they would like to see change. People's brains can change. It's neuroplasticity. And why would we tell people or why would anyone tell people like me that I don't exist, or that my desire to live authentically is fraudulent? What right does government have to tell me how I have to identify sexually? So I oppose AB 2943 because I believe it's a violation of our free speech and also people's rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next witness, please.
My name is Elizabeth Wanning. Sorry, I'm coming up at the last minute, so I'm speaking to you all completely spontaneously. I haven't had any time to prepare. I grew up believing that I was, didn't fit in with the girls. I didn't accept my life as a girl. I identified as a dyke. I had my first relationship with a woman. It began at 16. I came out in my early 20s. I lived locally here in Midtown in the gay community all through my 20s. I went to seminary, in a Presbyterian seminary in Chicago, Illinois. Openly gay. I was one of maybe 6 who were openly out and proud. When I graduated from seminary, I did ministry in the gay community, but my faith journey led me out of that lifestyle. As I pursued the Lord, I gained freedom. I eventually got married to a man, and I do ministry among other women who've had the same experience as me. I'm concerned that there is not enough reflective scientific study on the fluidity of sexuality for women specifically, and that this bill realized that many women seek refuge from misogyny and sexism in the arms of another woman. And this bill could hinder that experience of freedom and health, wholeness to women if it's passed. Please oppose this bill.
Thank you. Any others in opposition? If you could give your name and your affiliation, please.
Hi, my name is Ray Sullivan, and this bill I oppose because it's intolerant of my right to live as a ex-gay man, and also it takes away my right to therapy, to have a free psychological space. It's not just conversion therapy that this bill goes against. It goes against all of therapy, really. It ruins the therapeutic frame clinically. So
thank you.
Carl Conley with his ministries in Folsom. As a young man, I struggled with same-sex attractions, and they were unwanted. And it was the resources that would be impacted by this bill that were very helpful to me and put me on a different trajectory. And I've been married for 40 years and I've got 4 children, a very fulfilled life. In 1990, I started a ministry, and we weren't out there advertising, but I've had over the years hundreds of people that use the same kinds of resources that have made a huge impact on their lives. And so I would urge you to vote no so that we can have an opportunity, those that are looking for it.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, but we're through taking testimony. If you could just give your name, your affiliation, that you oppose the bill. Thank you.
Hello, I'm David Fisher from Castro Valley, Hope Group. I oppose this bill.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Charlene Krakowski from Bridging the Gaps Ministries. I oppose this bill.
I'm Jean Fisher from Castro Valley, co-director of Hope Group. I oppose this bill.
Reverend Char Blair, representing the Assemblies of God, Northern California, Nevada, 1,500 ministers, 500 churches. We stand opposed to this bill.
Todd Peterson, businessman and a former manager of multiple counseling centers. I oppose this bill.
Brian Noel, as a former gay man, I oppose this bill.
Becky Sweeney, individual, I oppose this bill.
Craig Sweeney, representing Bayside Church in Citrus Heights. I oppose this bill.
My name is Kelly Nienhuis, and I oppose this bill.
My name is Eric Waterbury. I oppose this bill.
Philip Escamilla, William Jessup University, in opposition. Thank you.
Ray Green, minister at TIP Ministries. We oppose this bill.
Dan Pelletier, Hamilton Square Baptist Church. Relatives who are seeking help and cannot get it, and a friend who died because he had such torment and sought help and couldn't get it. I oppose this bill.
Kristen Johns, an individual.
I oppose this bill as a violation of civil rights and the First Amendment.
Danielle Cullum, Capital Resource Institute, in opposition. Thank you.
So it's the First Amendment against the agenda. Which one did you take an oath to uphold?
Sir, if you could just give us your position, thank you.
Jonathan Keller from California Family Council. With respect to Assemblymember Lowe, we strongly oppose the bill.
Wendy Sickler, oppose this bill as a violation of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness.
Thank you. Anyone else in opposition? Thank you. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the committee. Questions, comments? Second. We do have a motion and a second. The motion is do pass. All right. Ms. Reyes?
Just want to be sure that we have some clarification. The bill does not prohibit counseling with a psychotherapist if somebody has any questions about their sexuality. Is that correct?
It is correct.
So they can go and receive, and from the analysis, acceptance, support, understanding, facilitation of exploring their sexuality. Is that correct?
Correct.
And is there anything in this bill that would prohibit a priest, a pastor, a rabbi from speaking with one of their parishioners, one of their members, about issues regarding their sexuality?
No.
That one of the gentlemen that spoke was part of a group called Born Perfect. I just want to say that that is a very appropriate name. I like that. Thank you. And the comments made also about the American Medical Association, American Psychological Association, they have taken a position on this, and they agree that the conversion therapy and reparative therapy are, they're against those therapies. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cholera.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Reyes, for some of those clarifications. And I want to thank everyone on both sides that came forward that revealed some very personal aspects of your life. And I know that's never easy, and it takes a lot of courage to do that. As you know, just a follow up on Senator Reyes's questions and comments. This does not stop anyone from seeking therapy, and in fact, there are a wide range of reasons why young people should seek therapy for a lot of different things. And I think that we talk about that all the time, counseling in schools, making sure that our young people are cared for. And that doesn't stop in adulthood. I think in adulthood also, and I would just say that this is really, in my estimation, more of a consumer fraud issue, because I believe that there's plenty of opportunity for appropriate counseling. There's plenty of opportunity to go to your faith-based organization to seek the support you need. However, therapies that start or that have the premise that sexual orientation and gender identity is a choice as part of that therapy, I think that's where the fraudulent aspect comes in, particularly when not only the individual that is going through that difficult time and trying to, when it comes to their own identity, but their families are as well. And I think families are being taken advantage of during a difficult time. And I think that the access, as stated in the report, that that it doesn't include therapies to provide acceptance, support, understanding of clients, and what have you, that also applies to the families. That they should also be seeking the kinds of therapies that allow for the relationship to be a loving relationship with them and their loved one, so that everyone gets the support they need. And I think that this bill absolutely still allows for that. And I want to thank the author for his courage for bringing this bill forward, and for his continued efforts to ensure that we have a loving community.
Thank you. Ms. Sledger.
I'm going to support this bill, obviously, today. It's a great bill. I just want a clarification on the retreat aspect. If a church held a retreat, and parishioners normally in a retreat do have to pay for their regular costs. If it's an overnight retreat, if you go to marriage retreat, you do this as well. Would that be prohibited if the retreat dealt with issues of sexuality?
Good morning. Anthony Sampson with Arnold and Porter. So because this is different than the Ted Lieu bill that we saw, SB 1172, which was in the Business and Professions Code, which sort of created this outright ban for minors for purposes of sexual orientation change efforts. This falls under the Consumer Legal Remedies Act. So in the situation you provided, there would have to be that underlying transaction to have occurred. So to go to that retreat, first, that threshold issue of what their payment, right? And then the second question is, would you know, the definition in the bill pertains to practices. So would that that conference wherein individuals were speaking, would they be practicing? And then, of course, there is this line between when do you enter into this world of sexual orientation change efforts, which is clearly defined in the bill, and we've seen courts uphold that language. When do you sort of cross that line into seeking to change one's sexual orientation? And I think at conferences where individuals are just speaking about sexual orientation change efforts and the fact that this exists and give their opinions on it and being very supportive of it, that's just them exercising their free speech rights. It's the moment that you cross into that territory and you are seeking to change their sexual orientation where, again, that's where you sort of cross the threshold in this bill. But again, the issue, again, would come, you'd have to ask a couple of questions before you even get there, which is, has that transaction occurred? Was that transaction solely for the purpose of attending a conference that's, sole focus was on sexual orientation change efforts? Are there multiple sessions on multiple different issues? And again, was that them actually practicing because the term in the bill is practicing, and so whether that constitutes a practice in a conference setting versus practicing within a church or within a medical facility.
I think I'm not clear. You actually caused me much concern. So, someone Catholic. I mean, I don't know what else we only have our own basis, right? So you go on a retreat with the church, right? If you want to get married or couples retreats, there's the church may bring people in. Would a church under this bill still, if you're paying simply for your overnight stay, and the church has a program by which people are voluntarily entering and we'll make it as simple as possible. The church brings somebody in who does in fact sit around a campfire and pray for your change of sexual orientation. Would that be illegal under this bill?
Likely not, because if the payment is for the overnight stay and the services are being offered to the participants at no cost, then this bill would not apply. So the Lieu bill that we saw was, again, just an outright prohibition, whereas this, you have to pay for the services being rendered.
Does this go to appropriations? I'm sorry. Right. I'm not sure I fully understand or feel fully comfortable. I do think I'm comfortable with this idea when we're talking about business practices and this is fraudulent. I'm getting concerned when we're talking about, I don't even want to say normal because it could span a wide variety of religious activities that I don't think we want to, I can't imagine we're trying to step there. That creates additional problems. So I just would like to continue to work with the author's office just to ensure that we can explore all the possibilities of how this could be prohibiting a religious institution from practicing their religion, basically. Whether we believe that to be valid or true or good, which I personally don't think that, but I think we need to be careful, that's all. So if the author, I'm going to, of course, support this, but the author is willing, since you don't have to come to my committee, but willing to come talk to me through the protections for normal religious activity, if that's okay.
Other questions, comments? All right, seeing none, Mr. Lowe, you may close.
Thank you very much. With respect, I acknowledge that this specifically is very narrow in scope under focused on this transactions under the Consumer Legal Remedies Act, and will still stay committed and will state that it is not the intent to go after religion or to churches, but rather this fraudulent practice itself. And so reiterating that notion, in the previous conversation, as it has passed the Consumer Protection and Privacy Committee with bipartisan support, this was similarly a conversation that one of our other fellow colleagues, who was an attorney herself, also raised. But that she was satisfied with that conversation with respect to this being very narrow in scope on these transactions. Finally, let me just hit to the notion of this concept of conversion therapy. This bill is an LGBT caucus priority of all 8 LGBT legislators in the state of California. And this notion of conversion therapy in itself, as if there's something wrong, then there's something inherently wrong. So aside from the fact, yes, we are in Assembly Judiciary Committee to talk about the specifics, and I hopefully feel that we have addressed those concerns. But this notion of conversion therapy, that we're somehow, there's something inherently wrong with us, is antithetical to my existence and to our colleagues' existence. Similarly, as you ask yourself that same question, can you be converted from whatever your sexual orientation is or your identity is? And I would suggest to you that the answer is no, and that I am equally proud of how you were born. I'm equally as proud as you stand. We in the state of California hope to demonstrate that we are a state of inclusion versus exclusion, and that we should just simply with love. And so I respectfully ask for a vote in supporting and leading with love.
Thank you.
I feel excluded.
So the motion is due pass. We do have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Stone?
Aye.
Stone, aye. Cunningham? Chow? Aye. Chow, aye. Chu? Aye. Chu, aye. Gonzalez-Fletcher? Aye. Gonzalez-Fletcher, aye. Holden? Aye. Holden, aye. Calra? Aye. Calra, aye. Kiley? Mainshine? Aye. Mainshine, aye. Reyes? Aye. Reyes, aye.
That bill is out. We do have an